I was doing a play off Broadway, finally, that was getting some notice after 10 years in New York. And it was called E-H question mark. And it was a British farce. And I did very well and got awards, and that's how Nichols heard about me. They said they want to screen test you, and you have to fly out to LA, and they sent me a scene. And then I said, I'd like to read the script. And they made an exception, I think, and sent me the script. I knew it was from a book, and I think I found a way to read the book, Charles Webb. And I didn't want to test for it because I didn't think I was right. That's the kind of guy I was. And Nichols heard that, and I was rather shocked and wanted to talk to me on the phone. And in fact, I had read for him once for a Broadway thing I didn't get. And he says, why don't you want to do it? I said, well, you know, I don't know how to do blonde hair, blue-eyed, 6 feet tall, head of the debating squad, champion runner on a college team. He was everything I wasn't. And his name is Benjamin Braddock. He says, you mean he's not Jewish? I remember Nichols said this on the phone. I said, well, he doesn't have to be Jewish. He just doesn't have to be so capital-lettered Aryan. And he said, well, maybe he's Jewish inside. Remember that line. He said, what do you think he should look like? Or how do you picture him? And I said, well, have you seen this week's Time magazine? And they had, I think it was a sketch of a young guy that looked like what Charles Webb wrote. I said, there's the guy you want. Robert Redford-ish. And then I found out, well, Redford had actually tested for it. So I said, okay, I'll come out reluctantly. I'm very slow at memorizing. I'm 10 pages, I'm studying, trying to memorize them on the plane. We go on the set, and I did it with Katharine Ross, the quite beautiful girl.
Did you just wash your clothes?
Yes. Sit down, please.
Where did you wash them?
And we rehearse, and Mike wants to do this, I learned later, in a master shot. I couldn't have told you what a master shot was, but the camera was there, and we're here, and then we get on the bed, and it comes over and around, and then it comes over here, and he wants to do 10 pages all in one take, and moving the camera. So maybe he's just working out himself, or he's trying to see, you know, can this guy who's basically just barely been on the stage, can he do movies? Can he, you know, work under these conditions? It's not a few lines and then cut.
Would you like the style?
And both Katharine and I kept screwing up. We were both violently nervous.
I haven't said I was going to marry you yet.
I know that. But I think you will.
And Buck Henry, obviously, and Mike had worked on it. And they, you know, they wanted it word for word. And if we left one word out, or they said, that's not a period, that's 3 dots. I mean, it was strict. Fine. But we weren't getting it. And I could feel the sweat building up a little bit. This was all day with the crew. And Mike takes me aside after, God knows, the 10th take or whatever. And I go to talk to him, and I think, oh, I hope he's going to tell me, thank you, just go back to New York. But he says, you know, you seem so nervous, ill at ease. I says, I am. I said, I really am. I told you I don't think I'm right, and I don't think I know the lines that well. I couldn't learn them fast enough. And I remember he said, well, just relax. He says, the curtain is not going to open. There's no audience. It's not the movie that's going to come out. It's a screen test. We may not even print most of this stuff when we put together the scene. There's no need for any pressure. And I looked at him and I said, okay, thank you. And he put his hand out to shake my hand. And I shook his hand. And his hand was so sweaty, it slipped out of mine because he was that nervous. So we finished the screen test, and I shook hands with people on the crew. And the prop man, who coincidentally wound up being the prop man on the film, I guess I had a hand in my pocket. And I took my hand out of my pocket and said, and thank you. I basically was apologizing for being there and taking, wasting their time all day. And I took my hand out of my pocket to shake his hand, and tokens fell out when I took my hand out. And the tokens then were about that big. And there's, I don't know, 8 of them on the ground. And I start to bend over. He says, no, that's okay, I'll get them. And he gets them, and as he's putting them in my hand, he says, here, kid, you're gonna need these. Very nice, very sweet, but that was a message. And I said, thank you. Parenthetically, when I got the part, the last day of shooting, the 100th day or whatever, this prop man gave me, and I still have it in my study, a frame with about 10 tokens in it. And it's a lovely gift. But this, I guess, is a long way of saying to you that there was no, I mean, after we finished it.
Then you're going to have to stop asking me that.
I was interviewed, and I had never gotten interviewed, and I said something in the interview like I didn't think I was right and I didn't want to test. And Rex Reed commented on that, and I have that review. And he said, this guy, this who off-Broadway guy, this cretin, called me a cretin was telling them, what he should or should not do. He's lucky he got, it was that adversarial. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and I experienced a good dose of anti-Semitism as a kid. My father moved around a lot because he was always trying to better himself. So we'd go to a better street, a better house, and after a year, he'd go broke again and we'd have to move to a lower. But consequently, I would meet a different set of kids when I was going through grammar school and junior high. And when kids or whoever would ask me what I was, I had a whole act I did. I said, what do you mean? Well, what religion are you? I said, oh, we're not religious. Well, are you Jewish? I said, well, no, we're just Americans. I would like to play dumb. Luckily, at least the lie wasn't that difficult because my father was an atheist, so we never did go to synagogues, and I wasn't bar mitzvahed, so I knew very little about that side of being Jewish. But that was certainly in me in terms of a cursed identity. And when I got the part, it was almost like a bad joke. I think Mike may have felt it was a mistake when we were filming. Katharine Ross and I got to be very good friends, and we used to look at each other and say the same thing. Is he in a bad mood? I think he is. He saw the rushes of what we did yesterday. Maybe that, I don't think I was very good. I don't think I was either. But this is what it felt like to be shooting for a long time. We shot 100 days. Now that's extraordinary. That's like 3 movies today. And he got that because of his talent, Mike, and because of his success. But while we were going through that 100 days, we felt, he had his doubts. And I think he did, and I see no reason why he shouldn't, because there was an image of what the leading man was. I had a couple of friends, Robert Duvall and Gene Hackman, and the 3 of us kind of hung out together. And I think we were in New York for the same reason. We didn't think we had a chance in Hollywood. I remember I went to the Pasadena Playhouse because I grew up in Los Angeles, and I was failing out of junior college. So I said, nobody, They can't fail me at a school where it's just acting. And Gene, that's where I met Gene. And we literally would see when a class was over, we would go out, and in the hallway would be these gorgeous looking guys. And so stage acting was kind of a thing, well, maybe we'll get more auditions if we're in New York than if we're in LA. And none of us looked like, I mean, if at a party or something, people were told we were going to wind up being movie stars, it would have been, the joke of the week. So we're in New York because that's where we have a chance. The other reason is we were serious about being actors and being good. And it was the place where the greatest teachers in the world were. I was with Lee Strasberg. There was Stella Adler. Bob was with Sandy Meisner. The Neighborhood Playhouse, I think it was called, comes back to me. And who taught dance there? Martha Graham. So, I mean, those were the kind of giants that existed then. And that was the reason to be in New York. As far as going to see stuff, we couldn't afford it. In fact, we would sneak in Broadway. We were second actors. People come out after the first act, and then the second act, they don't check your thing, and you just kind of walk in with them, and you go straight to the balcony, and you try to find a seat way in the back there. And we see the second act, maybe third act. But that was, and we saw great performances. That was another reason to be there, to sneak in and to see people like Geraldine Page and Kim Stanley. My God, the power. Jason Robards. This was a dream, just to be there. Theater was theater. And actors who were offered soap operas, you did not tell anybody. That was selling out. If you were given a nomination, let's say for the Golden Globes, you did not tell anybody. You were respected for what you didn't do. And there was a kind of community of unemployed actors who really were not unemployed actors, but were artists. And that was, if you want to call it a conceit, which I'm sure it probably partly was, but that was the umbrella which we worked under. That's what we wanted to be. Gene Hackman was hired to be Mr. Robinson, and I was excited when I heard this. And he was also a new actor, and I think a brilliant one. And there were some scenes that he was in. I remember Paramount Studios. It was a long urinal in my memory. And I'm on one end, and he's on the other, and he's taking a piss, and I'm taking a piss, and he looks over at me, and he says, "I think I'm getting fired." And I looked, I said, "What?" He says, I says, "How do you?" I said, "No, you're not gonna." He says, "I can feel it. I can feel the way Mike talks to me." "Why?" He says, "I don't know, but I just have a feeling." And he did. Now, that was one of the best things that ever happened to Gene Hackman, because he was free and able to do, and Warren Beatty knew the good actors. I mean, he knew what was around, and he cast this unknown to be in Bonnie and Clyde, which really, I think did bigger things for him than maybe The Graduate would have done. We had what is never done. We had like a month of rehearsal. People don't rehearse for movies, even today. No studio is going to pay a crew, and you're not shooting, for a month of rehearsal. And Mike would have the cinematographer, the brilliant Bob Surtees, come on. It was a room we had. It's like the theater when you rehearse. They kind of mark out, these are stairs, and this is that room, and they chalk it out. And Surtees would come, and they would look, the finder. Sam Osteen, brilliant editor. Osteen would watch some of the rehearsals. But at the beginning, in the first 2-3 weeks, it was just us, the principal actors. And he had studied with Strasberg. He had studied at the studio, and early in his career, I think. And he knew the process of what we were being taught, to start from zero and to slowly find this character within us. He said to me, "Did you have any heroes when you were growing up?" "Well, I loved Gregory Peck," I said, in The Yearling. I said that I wanted my father to be like him. And he says, "Well, beside that," I said, "Well, I just had one sibling, my older brother, and he would qualify as my hero. He was everything I wasn't. He was an A student, I was a failure. He was on the varsity football team, I was on basically, tennis. And then suddenly, when he would need a breath, he'd go, he said, "Well, do the scene again and just get a sense of that." And I did, and I had a few, held my breath. And afterwards he said, "Let's try it again and just do the essence of it. Don't try to be your brother. Just whatever stays on you." And we did it again, and I went, "Oh." And that's how was born.
Are you afraid of me?
Oh, no, you're missing the point. Look.
Another example would be Anne Bancroft sitting on the bed when she just has a bra on. And Mike said, "Do you remember the first time you made out with a girl?"
Ask me anything you want.
Is this your first time?
I said, "Oh, yes." It was junior high school.
It is your first time.
And we were in the show they used to put on once a year. And we had to wait our turn. We were like in the basement, then we'd go up to the stage. And I wanted to be a piano player, so I was always playing the piano. It's always Bumble Boogie, and the kids used to say, "Oh God, we gotta hear Bumble Boogie again." But this gal was going to sing an Al Jolson song, Mammy, and she had blackface on. It was done a lot in those days. And for some reason, there's a little attraction that starts. And I kind of just put my arm around. I'm telling Nichols this. And suddenly I see her breast, and I've been wanting to feel a breast for God knows how many years. And I just work up the courage, and I hold her breast. I remembered vividly, and she let me. I couldn't get close to her, 'cause I'd get blackface all over me. So there was a distance between us, and I'm just holding her breath. And when Mike heard that, he says, "I want you to do," and that was the greatest experience I ever had. I hadn't had that many. And then when the film started, there was an added aspect of it, and that was, that was the fun. And now we're putting stuff on the screen. And because we weren't allowed to see any dailies, and I heard later, he specifically didn't want, he said, "No one sees them." And he specifically didn't want Anne Bancroft seeing him because he was lighting her in a way that she would have found unkind. I was 29 in real life, and he was lighting me in the most attractive way, so I would look 22. She's like 35. She's 6 years older. That's it. And he wanted her to look like she was in her 40s. And so he was lighting her in that way. But he wasn't coming in preset. And a lot of directors do. They not only have their own vision, but there are some directors who say every line of every actor during a take. And I always think those are the ones you have to really watch out for, because they've already got the scene shot in their head. And the least favorite thing they have is seeing the actors not doing it as well as they did in their head. And Mike was the opposite on this experience, the only one I had with him. And it doesn't get there any other way. It gets there by the director guiding you to a certain point, and then you jump the way you're gonna jump, off the side of the cliff or whatever. I mean, you don't get a chance to do this in movies unless it's worked out. I mean, writers do it. Painters do it. They sketch, they try things. Sometimes they paint over. Writers write the next morning, throw it away, start over again. No. Movies, because of the cost of it, you have to shoot a certain amount of stuff, come hell or high water, because if you don't make it, the money is doubled the next day. And he was not in that, he was not constricted like that. And Bancroft, I must admit, I was so excited that she was in it, but not just because it was Anne Bancroft. She was married to Mel Brooks, and he was my hero, because I had heard the 2,000-year-old man on records, and a friend of mine, myself, pre-graduate, memorized it. And I would be the Mel Brooks character, and my friend would be the Carl Reiner guy, the guy that interviews the 2,000-year-old man. And we would do it at parties to try to meet girls and act like it was ours, because it was, you know, it was not that well known at the beginning. And then I hear that Mel Brooks wants me in his movie. He's doing a movie called The Producers. He doesn't want me to do the Gene Wilder part. He wants me to play another guy, Kenneth Mars, I think, the valet of Hitler. And I read it, and I thought the script was brilliant. You could have put it on the stage, which they ultimately did as a musical. And I said yes. And then The Graduate happened. And I had to choose, I hadn't signed any contract, I had to choose The Graduate over this, which I would have considered a breakthrough, working with Mel Brooks. And doubly, his wife, I'm now picking the movie his wife is in. So there was a bit of a friction that Anne told me between Mel and her, because he was in New York. And she said that every time she talked to him on the phone, he would always say the same thing. You know, has he kissed you yet? He was very jealous. And she...
I could make you some coffee.
No. I mean, I wouldn't want to wake anyone up.
After Katharine Ross did this, we stayed friends, and I would call her sometimes and say, are you gonna do this thing with John Wayne? Something about Hellbusters, or I don't know what it was called. He's Fires in the Forest or something. And she says, yeah. I said, are you sure you want to do that? And there were a couple of films like that. She did do Butch Cassidy, which I thought was very smart. But I don't think that she considered herself or her chance at being as respected and as big an actress as I think she could have been.
Of course there is. Look, there's the palm room right there.
Good evening.
But her reputation around the country, or whoever I talked to after the movie came out, guys would only want to talk about her. Oh my God, most beautiful girl I've ever seen in my life. Oh my God. I mean, she was, and she was. I don't think she felt it. She was kind of just regular, and just an actor like me who felt she wasn't living up to the standard that Mike wanted. Now, a lot of directors don't like that. A director many times is, by definition, a control freak. And there really are three kinds of directors in a way. There's directors who really don't like to shoot, but have to. They can't wait to get in the cutting room. They don't want to go through all this. They know what they want, and it takes so long for everybody to give them what they want. And then there are directors who want to be surprised. Mike wanted to be surprised. Hal Ashby wanted to be surprised. Schlesinger wanted to be surprised. They're not threatened. There's also directors that will listen to crew. I mean, that's a no-no. And I always say, I said, wait a minute, wait, because I elicit that. And I say to the prop guy, well, what'd you say? What you gonna say? No, I'm not supposed to. It's like it's like those old gangster movies, and they're in Alcatraz. Here, I can't talk, here comes a screw. I said, no, give me your idea. Had agreed to let a movie shoot there. And somebody's given them enough money, and someone said, don't worry, whatever we do, we just need 3 days. It'll be all cleaned up afterwards. Bullshit. Don't ever rent your house or whatever for a movie unless you don't care that you're gonna get it back the same way, because you don't, no matter how careful people are. So it ain't 3 days. I think we're in our second week. And we're now at the point where, and it's the Reverend, and he's screaming, stop, stop. He never lost his sweet guy, stop. everybody out. That's it, everybody out. Because apparently this plate glass or whatever it was, window was shaking. And he thought it was gonna break. And I said, reassured him, don't worry, we'll replace it. No, the person that gave the church that has passed on, it's as a, sentimental value. No. What are we gonna do? And Nichols comes up to me, he says, is there a way you can hit the window without, if you put your hands out? Either you do that or we're gonna have to redo all this stuff at another church. So it's in the movie. I'm going, Elaine, kind of, And reviews come out later that loved the movie and loved Mike Nichols and said how brilliant a choice to make me Christ-like when I'm pounding on the window. And that was the truth. It's a very well-made film. It's an artistic piece of work. His own vision, his ability to construct shots with the cinematographer and the editor in a rehearsal situation and change their minds, even on the set sometimes. Anything he wanted, he got. So if you're in an art form that allows you to keep doing it over until you get it right, you'll see there would be more films that worked on a better level. So that's one reason. He had extremely good taste. He had a wonderful sense of humor, obviously, and he stayed open. Renoir, the son, who was a filmmaker, said in an interview I saw on film, said, don't wait until everything is right in a script because it'll never be right. Art doesn't work that way. You do as much as you can and then you start shooting. And remember that when you're shooting, you don't have to know all the answers. And also remember that you're not the only painter or author. The audience is. They fill it in their own way. Don't be afraid to let them have that opportunity. I waited a year before I made another movie because I wanted to go back to the theater. I don't like movies. It's so painful to go there every day and think you're bad. And so I didn't work for a year. And then Midnight Cowboy came and I took that role. And Mike even called me and said, so you're gonna do this Midnight Cowboy and you're gonna play the cowboy? No. I'm playing this other guy, wrestler. No, he was shocked. He said, I made you a star. And now you're gonna throw that away and play this ugly? I said, no, it's a good part, Mike. I said to Mike years later, I said, we should do a sequel. Ann was still alive, Katharine. He says, I always wanted to. I just have never been able to figure it out. I said, well, I got some of it. He said, what? I said, well, I think I marry Katharine Ross, and we have children, and one of them is a son, and the son has a girlfriend, and I wind up seducing my son's girlfriend. So I turn out to be Mrs. Robinson. And he liked that. And we just never went anywhere, but I remember I said, what do you think I do for a living? Because I was the rebel, I was symbolizing it. He said, oh, that's easy. I said, what? He says, you direct television commercials.